Today we're going to be finally putting the motor back in the Subaru. Before we start moving the motor over there we're going to get the throttle bearing put on, clutch fork set into place, and then we'll move forward to dropping the engine in.
So Dan Sr. and Danny over there at Metro Performance of Southern California did the work. They assembled their basically in-house short block, new case halves, intake sprocket service, new STI crank, ACL main and rod bearings, Manley rods, CP pistons. It's got new oil pump, new water pump, new thermostat, ARP 625 head studs. The heads were cleaned, new valves, new seals, guides, new oil cooler, new gaskets, new OEM crank sprocket, Gates timing kit, and all new hoses. They did a great job, very helpful, and if I had any questions to get this thing back in, they were more than willing to help.
Next we'll slide this pin in. This tab's going to go horizontal and it'll slide right into this roll pin. See if we can make that happen. And there we go. Came out the other side. I'll just throw this thing in for now.
So next, we'll get the motor up in the air, get it wheeled over, and start getting it dropped inside the engine bay. You want to just take your time, slowly dropping the motor down and back towards the transmission a little bit at a time. You can line up the bottom studs and the dowels, work it onto the transmission splines, and eventually once you get it on there, it'll slide onto the transmission nice and easy.
Pretty close.
Yep, I'm going to pull it back in close. Oh.
It's supposed to, yeah, it's right there. It's pretty close.
Top gap and the bottom gap pretty much the same.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Up or down on your side? Oh.
It doesn't need to go up anymore. I think that's good.
Yep. It's in there, right?
Yep.
Unfortunately, I've been having an issue with this camera. It gives me about 30 minutes and then it gets too hot. Camera died, so I was right in the middle of it. Wanted to keep going. So basically, I tilted the motor front to back so it's squared up on the transmission. I had the transmission up high enough to where once the motor went on, the studs for the motor mounts would clear the subframe underneath. And it did not want to slide on at first. What I did, spun the crank just a little bit. I think it's a 22mm socket. Always spin it clockwise, so that's the rotation of the motor. Just a little bit at a time. I felt like it was ready to slide on. Kind of lift it up on the front a little bit, shaking it, and thing just all of a sudden slid right on. Now it didn't go on all the way. There was probably about a 1/4 to a 1/4 inch gap, which I was comfortable with because, like I said, I felt it slide on the splines of the transmission shaft, and then from there I kind of wiggled it, worked it on a little bit more, checked, made sure the dowels on the side, each dowel was in its hole. I had this use the studs on the bottom to line it up and slid those on first. Then once I got it going and it slid on there, I threw in this bell housing bolt, which is a long one. The second long one goes up here. These aren't going in all the way because the starter sits here, so I just put them in as placeholders for now. But I used this bell housing bolt down here, as well as I threw this nuts on the bottom studs. I used this one, and then slowly worked this one and this one to kind of pull it on a little bit. If you're ever doing it and you feel it kind of hang up and it doesn't want to move, stop, loosen it, and you're gonna have to probably restart. You don't want to force it on. As long as it's nice and easy going on, it's not binding, and the bolt's threaded nice and easy, and just suck it right on, you should be good. So once I got it on there, you can see I hooked up the spring. Now I believe this is the clutch actuator, whatever you want to call it. This is pushing this rod forward to pull the throwout bearing. I had this off just to give me room. Once I got this thing seated together, I pushed this thing towards the firewall, and you'll hear a noticeable click. Once that click is in, you should be good, as long as it's not coming back out. So once that happened, I bolted this back down, 14mm bolts, hooked the spring back up. Before I move forward, I'm gonna have to torque the bell housing bolts that I can get to right now. This one down here, I'll go ahead and torque the studs on the bottom. These won't get torqued yet.
Here's the service manual pages for installing the motor. It contains all the torques needed to tighten everything back down. I'll add in more as we go.
Once it's on there, I dropped it down. One of the motor mount studs dropped right into place. The other one was hung up on the subframe. Little side to side shake and dropped right on. Now that it's in there, I put the studs for the motor mounts on the bottom, which one through right there, the other one right there. They're hand tight at this point, and then now I can tighten up these two. I guess they call them the transmission cushion rubber. Has the transmission mount. Factory service manual calls it a cushion rubber for the transmission. I had to jack the transmission up to be able to clear the engine motor mounts. You jack this up high enough just to where the motor will mount to the tranny, and just clear the studs on the motor mounts will just clear this cross member right here. So now we can start torquing the bell housing bolts down. Yeah, you can see opted for this IAG oil pan setup. A little extra capacity, a little bit of cooling with these fins. Yeah, just an all-around better setup, I think, than the factory, as well as instead of having to use sealant to mount it to the motor, it has a nice O-ring gasket. Probably a hell of a lot easier to mount up and make sure it's sealed. You know, over at Metro, they already installed this whole setup before I picked the motor up, so. Alright, so you can see I move forward a little bit more. Unfortunately, this thing keeps turning off every 20 minutes or so. But, so I got the pitch stop on there. I believe this is 37. This is 42. I got the starter on there. It slides right in. You got these two bell housing bolts, one on the bottom, one on the top. You got this bracket for this ground, goes in between bolt head and the starter. So all these bell housing bolts get torqued to 37. So there's a little connector on the back. I don't know if you can see it. That gets put on there, and then underneath this rubber is the power for the starter. Hooked up these heater core lines. Top goes to top, bottom goes to bottom. Oil feed, and then the oil drain. It's right down here. It's got this tape over it. This will get a rubber hose on it coming up into the turbo. This has a metal line that'll connect to this oil feed. Before I get this going, I am going to hit this with the wire wheel just to clean it up a little bit. Hit this up pipe area. One thing I opted for, I didn't get any studs, but I got a bunch of these new exhaust bolts because a lot of these are all rusted and old. So you can see I got the exhaust on. I just hand tied all these nuts right here on the head studs. I mounted up the up pipe, got these studs, and got it hanging by the bracket up top. All these bolts, exhaust bolts, take 26 foot-pounds of torque. Again, I was having issues with my camera, so I just got them up in there. I still need to take off all these. I like to put some anti-seize on all these bolts and nuts that are going to get heat cycled. Just makes it easier usually down the road if you have to take it apart. So I'm going to take each one of these off, put a little anti-seize on there, tighten them down to 26. With these headers, has to clear this front part of the frame, so I have to separate the up pipe and these headers when I put them in. I try to take them off with this connected, but like I said, because of this little lip here, I have to push the headers back, and because of the up pipe hitting this cross member, wouldn't allow it. So put them back in, had to do the same thing. Slid these headers in first, got it situated, got a couple bolts and nuts to hold it, and then slid the up pipe down in here. Got these bolts to hang it for now. New gaskets in there. Same with the header to head flanges, they both get new gaskets. So get these on, tighten down. Okay, so I got the exhaust all tightened up. Turns out this up pipe bolt and nut right here I got from the top. I just used about 4 extensions to get back there, and it made it a hell of a lot easier. Before I drop the turbo on, I got this turbo drain, oil drain, and I got this turbo coolant line on there. Kind of a little pain, but it's not too bad if you orientate that clamp towards the back. It makes it a lot easier to get tight. Anti-seize on the threads for the turbo. Gaskets on there. I hit this with a little bit of a wire brush, cleaned it up just a little bit, wiped it down with some brake cleaner. So let's see if we can drop this on and keep moving forward. And before I do that, take this cap off. Guy at Metro put this cap on there for me. He said just go ahead and keep it, so that was pretty cool. Now I'll get this thing slid on there. Get these on the what am I hitting? Like I can just slide that over. This will come over. Okay, so I got the turbo on, hooked up that oil drain down there, went in pretty smooth. Hooked on this coolant line right here. I tightened this down originally, this up pipe bracket bolt, along with this one, but I'm having an issue getting this oil feed to line up, so I end up having to loosen this one and this one back up. But I want to keep the hoses attached so they're not moving around. I'm just gonna have to try to finagle this thing to get it to move into the right spot. Just seems like the angle of it isn't quite right. There's not really any way to move this pipe. It's mounted to there and it goes part of this oil, this ABCS oil feed line, so it just comes straight up and down. This thing bolts, so it's all fixed in place. I'm guessing the only way to make it work is just lining up the turbo better. I know, Brian. You can see the angle is off considerably. I don't think this thing could have gotten bent. Alright, so I got this thing on there. I had to take this bracket off, loosen all the turbo nuts holding it on, kind of finagle this thing one, and then two, actually had to bend this line a little bit to get it to line up straight with this line. It's kind of a pain in the ass, and I'm hoping that will seal up and there won't be an issue. If there is, I have that IAG oil line. I'll throw that on there. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. And this is all good, but next I'll tighten all these nuts down. This bracket I'll tighten the turbo nuts first onto the studs. Turbo to up pipe studs, and then I'll get this bracket tightened down last. Well, I'm not even going to use a torque wrench. Just snug it up, hand tight. So I have these AN wrenches. They come in pretty handy. It turns out that is basically a 6. This one gets tightened down 14 foot-pounds, I believe. Okay, so I got this downpipe on there, pretty much slide it up from underneath and just rest it on the ground. I picked it up and got it on the bottom studs, then got these 2 bolts lined up and started. Underneath the car, lifted it up, it hangs. There's a hanger down there, you can pick it up, get it to sit on that hanger. This thing we'll attack is getting the intake manifold on. We'll get this tape ripped off there, and then we'll get that thing kind of dropped down on there with the new gaskets. Gonna hit the bottom of these a little brake clean just to make sure they're nice and clean. You can see this old gasket material on there. You see, Mommy?
There? Wait, you got your shoes on and everything?
So I got the intake manifold snagged in there. I got this hose clamp on the turbo. Kind of get that clamp in place to where you can get a socket on it right there. It's tight down. I got a couple TGV bolts in there, 2 on each side. Got all the electrical kind of routed how I need to go for now. We'll do next is go ahead and get some anti-seize on all these TGV bolts. I think it's like 18 foot-pounds. I'll double check that, but yeah, it's not a whole lot. Again, just a A little bit on. I left. Dropped in there. So I'm gonna snug these all down. Just hand tight. Go to the outside one. Really start getting all these connectors hooked up. Get all these down here, one's back there. Get all these on this side, all these on this side. I'm going to leave the fuel lines, all this disconnected for now.
I hooked up the connectors on the side. These blue wires are the front O2 sensor. This is the AVCS solenoid connector. Cam sensor is down there. Then behind that, you have the TGV sensor is down there. There's a bracket for this O2 sensor. You mount that off the coil pack. Then I also hooked up the injectors. There's one for each on both sides. Then you route this blue wire up. Connects right here. Then these are the two main harness connectors on this side. There's two on the other side as well. This bolt right here is the harness ground on this side. There's an identical one on the opposite
Same
side.
with this one, I got this line ran. This breather line coming off of the hard line underneath, around, down to the valve cover. I got same thing, all the connectors done on this side, injectors, TGV, valve. There's the other TGV side. The crank sensor is down there, or cam sensor. I have the other breather which will hook to the AOS. Same with this side. Only thing I forgot was I didn't hook up the coil packs on this side. That's on. Any of this in the front yet. We have coolant temp sense right here. Here's the crank sensor. This will be for the power steering. I'm not going to put that in yet because I'm replacing this pump. I have a new one sitting there. This is for the vacuum. Not exactly sure what. And then the oil dummy light right here. Oh, son of a bitch. This thing is so old and messed up. It's cracking like crazy. I already plugged in the knock sensor down there. It's the brownish plug. Comes off this little harness, goes to the throttle body. This vacuum hose brake from the brake booster plugged into the intake manifold. I just shoved this breather hose on for the fuel lines for right now. Get out of the way. The AC just sitting here, as well as the alternator cable, the alternator plug. There's the power for the battery, fuel lines. Here's the drain line for the AOS, and I believe this gets heat wrap, and it will run to this one right here. Alright, so we're going to continue along, putting all this stuff back on the Subaru. I got a new Koyo Rad radiator. Just swapped the fans and this coolant line over. Pretty much all these, this, and this, all 10mm bolts. Get that off, and then it just slides up and out of these pegs. You're going to slide this one up first, and then this left side up, passenger driver's side second. This one has a little groove on the bottom where this fan sits on, so if you try to install this one first, which I did, this one won't go down. So yeah, just reinstallation this one, then slide this one in, and then just tighten the bolts.
one's in. Hard to see, but that one is in as well. And it's just a matter of sliding this one on and getting it on there. So next I can plug the fan in. This little connector down here. See if I can find it. There it is. There we go. Same with this side. This connector right down there. Slides right in, same as the other side. It's in nice and tight. I'm gonna get these radiator hoses on. Get this tape off of here and off the bottom. I'll get those hoses ran and plumbed in. The problem is it slides on from the other side. Got the lower radiator hose on there, pretty self-explanatory. Comes with thermostat housing off of there down to the lower port on the radiator. I got this new power steering pump put on. It's that bolt back there, which takes a swivel to get to that bolt, and then there's one at the bottom opposite side. I'm just snugging these up right now. Catch as much of this crap as possible. 15mm. This is the high pressure. Looks to be like it just drops right in like that. I get it to slide on this O-ring. Only make sure this thing is on. A little shut off and you have no idea. And then you're sitting there torquing it and nothing's happening and you... Okay, one pretty tight. See if I can get this one. That one. I'll get this one. This one again is just gonna get snugged out. Down pipe torque to the turbo. Now let's get these.
Finish torquing down these downpipe exhaust bolts, and then I'll tighten up this hanger for the downpipe. That's the end of part 1, and we'll get finished up in the second part.